Good night, YouTube. Nurse Stevens Brittle here. Tonight I want to talk a little bit about a diagnosis called postpartum preeclampsia. And I hope you have a few minutes to listen to this video because it is something that it can save your life. If you are a pregnant mother, it can save your life. And if you are a nurse taking care of pregnant women, it can save their lives. I had an experience with postpartum preeclampsia. I was diagnosed with postpartum preeclampsia after having my third baby. So the way I ended up finding out was I had a C-section and I was having some discomfort in the incision area. And I went back to my doctor about I want to say a week later for my checkup or 2 weeks later. And when I got to the doctor's office, they were checking my blood pressure. And, just like the normal part of the checkup, they just checked my blood pressure. And when they checked it, it said 190 over, I don't even know, 100 or something like that. It was literally super high, 190. And then they checked it again. I said, you want to check my other arm? They checked it again. It was 170 over something. And I just made them check it 3 times. I was I literally asked the nurse, I said, I think your machine is broken, because I was there's no way my blood pressure is 190. It's always under one, it's always 1 something, 107 over, over 60, over 70, it's always, on the lower end or, normal side. So when she said it was coming up 180, 190, I really thought it was the machine that was broken. So she said, okay, I'm going to just let the doctor know. So she let the doctor know. The doctor came in and he said, what's going on with this funky blood pressure? And I said, I don't know. I think something's wrong with the machine. And he said, well, how have you been feeling? I said, I've been having this this very light headache. And he was like, really? And he was like, well, I'm going to give you something for your blood pressure. I don't think it's preeclampsia, but I'm going to give you something for your blood pressure anyway, because we can't have you, running around with this high blood pressure. So he also, examined me and noticed that I did have a little bit of something that could have potentially gone into an infection. So he took care of that. So long story short, I went home with the prescription. I got the medication and I took the medication. And I don't know, but it was nicardipine that he had given me. So he gave me the medication. I think it was a 30 milligram dose. And when I took the medication, I guess what happened is my blood pressure dropped so fast because out of nowhere I had this rocking headache. And I was like, it was the worst headache I've ever felt in my entire life. And now looking back on it, I really believe that what happened was it dropped my blood pressure because it was riding really high, and the medication was probably really strong and potent. It just dropped my blood pressure very quickly. And in doing that, it caused me to have vasodilation, which caused me to have that shock of a headache. And nothing worked. I took a Motrin, my head was still rocking, right? So long story short, I ended up telling a friend of mine who happens to be an L&D nurse that I was having these symptoms. I told her, I said, I feel like I have a headache, this light lingering headache. I said, my hands are swollen. I said, I'm having my face is a little swollen and stuff like that. And my blood pressure was 190. And she said, that sounds like postpartum preeclampsia. And I said, what? I said, wait a minute. I said, preeclampsia can happen after I have the baby, because this is a week or 2 after I had the baby that we're talking about. She said, yeah, it can happen after you have the baby. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, okay. So I texted my doctor. I said, my friend, told me, who's a nurse, told me that she thinks it might be preeclampsia. And he said, well, I don't think it's preeclampsia, but if you want to go to the emergency room, you should go. So I told my friend what he said. And she said, listen, you need to go immediately. And not only that, but she called her friend who's a LED, who's a GYN doctor, and her friend who's a doctor. So you go to the doctor, not now, not today, yesterday, you need to go to the hospital. So, she knew that when I got to the hospital, they were going to be keeping me overnight. She knew that. She didn't want to tell me because I had a newborn baby at home. She didn't want to tell me that. So she knew. But long story short, I listened to my friend and I went to the ED. And when I got there, it was a little lower than it had been. It was 170s. So but they checked it like 2 or 3 times and it still was way higher than it should be. So it was like 170 something, whatever. So long story short, they ended up admitting me. They ended up putting me on something called a magnesium drip, which was to help bring down my blood pressure. And they started me on some antihypertensives, one of them being labetalol and one of them being Norvasc. Guys, the reason why I'm telling you this story is because preeclampsia is something that can, if you don't take care of it because your blood pressure is high. Can you imagine me with a high blood pressure for that amount of time? A blood pressure of 160 to 190 over a course of 2 weeks straight. And guys, let me tell you real quick. The first sign that I had of this was that I was feeling lightheaded and dizzy. Just so you know what to look out for. I was feeling a little off. So that was a sign that my blood pressure was high. I was dizzy. All right. And then that kind of balanced out. So I was like, okay, I started drinking water. I was hydrating myself. And I was also nursing. So I was thinking it was lack of sleep causing me to feel dizzy. I was thinking I was not drinking enough water, and the fact that I was nursing, and maybe not eating the way I should because I was like, taking care of a new baby and stuff like that. So I'm thinking that all of these things was contributing to what I was feeling. But it was not that. It was actually the preeclampsia what I was causing this. So I, basically I'm saying that what you have to do is when you start feeling dizzy and lightheaded, that's a sign right then and there. And then not only that, you need to check, you probably should have a blood pressure machine at home when you have the baby, after you have the baby, just to keep an eye on your blood pressure, because it's just important to know that your blood pressure can shoot up after you have a baby. It's very important to know that. And so long story short, I ended up on this medication. It ended up balancing out my blood pressure. But what could have happened is I could have ended up with a stroke, right? Because having a blood pressure, a high blood pressure, actually high blood pressure is like the #1 cause of stroke. So I could have ended up with a stroke, and a stroke is very, very severe because it could put you you could have long-term deficits. Basically, you could have weakness on one side of the body. You could end up having speech issues, trouble walking, trouble talking, just a numerous amount of things. And it's very, very serious because a stroke can be from mild to severe symptoms that you could end up with. So I was really grateful that I had a friend who knows about this, who was able to tell me this. But if you don't have somebody that knows this, you wouldn't even know that something is wrong. And, it's becoming more and more common. Like the prevalence is high of people having these, of women actually, and what preeclampsia can actually cause death in women as well. So it's a high risk of pregnant women of women dying after pregnancy and during pregnancy as well for things like this. So it's very important to pay attention to these signs and symptoms and get help and get treatment right away. If you feel dizzy, and I might just add in this video a list of what to look out for. But I had swollen hands, I had trouble speaking, I was dizzy, lightheaded, and my blood pressure was sky high. Okay, so those were my symptoms. All right, and I could have ended up with a stroke. So I thank God that, like I said, I had my friend to tell me. But guys, if you watch this video, please do not ignore none of those signs or symptoms. If you are a pregnant woman, if you know a woman who is pregnant, who is complaining of these things, it can save their life. It can save their life. And it is more common than you might think. And like I said, I didn't know that preeclampsia can happen after you have the baby, but it can. It can, up to, I believe, 3 to 6. I don't want to talk specifically about the time frame because I'm not an L&D. That's not my specialty. But from what I read, it can happen for quite a few weeks after you have the baby. So, but yeah, if you do have any of these symptoms, guys, check in with your OBGYN ASAP and make sure you let someone know and make sure you get some help because it could truly save your life. So all the best on your pregnancy journey. And if you are a nurse, I hope that this information helps you in taking care of your patients in the long run. Okay. Have a great night. God bless.